Hello, this is Cheryl, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the March 10th issue of the Washington Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the headlines: Iran war's oil shock fuels GOP political anxiety. Oil prices Monday spiked to levels not seen since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022 before falling, while prices at the pump jumped nearly 50 cents higher than a week ago. By Hannah Knowles. President Donald Trump was eager to point to gas prices in his State of the Union speech last month as he touted administration's progress on the economy. Gasoline, which reached a peak of over $6 a gallon in some states under my predecessor, it was, quite honestly, a disaster, is now below $2.30 a gallon in most states. Trump boasted minutes into his nearly 2-hour address, framing his party's message heading into the midterms. 2 weeks later, his war with Iran threatens to undermine that pitch. Oil prices Monday spiked to levels not seen since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, while prices at the pump jumped nearly 50 cents higher than a week ago. The price per barrel jumped to almost $120 at one point Monday before dropping to under $90 by the end of the day, as Trump suggested the war with Iran could end soon. But the roller coaster still left some in his party anxious about the political and economic fallout, particularly as Iran vowed to continue retaliatory strikes. At a briefing Tuesday, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said Iran's mullahs are desperate and scrambling, and it would be our most intense day of strikes inside Iran. General Dan Kane, the Joint Chiefs of Staff chairman, said the U.S. military would look at the range of options if tasked with escorting tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, which is effectively closed because of the conflict, ratcheting up global energy anxieties. The higher prices have intensified some Republicans' warnings about the political risks of a drawn-out conflict as the Trump administration has issued conflicting messages about its plans. On Monday, Trump said at one point the war was nearly finished, then hours later told Republican lawmakers that he would press ahead in Iran, seeking ultimate victory that will end this long-running danger once and for all. We have only just begun to fight, the Department of War declared on social media Monday, just before Trump told CBS News that the war was very complete. Even as the White House asserted the price hikes would be temporary, it became clear Monday that Trump sought to stem the political fallout. In social media posts late Monday, the president warned that Iran would be hit 20 times harder if the country does anything to stop the flow of oil in the Strait of Hormuz. Republicans already face a challenging political environment in this year's elections. The president's party historically loses seats in the midterms, and Trump's approval has dropped in recent months, driven in part by concerns about rising costs, which the president's advisors have urged him to focus on. Gas was one thing that they had been touting as an economic win, said Mitchell Brown, a Republican pollster working on midterm races. A reversal on that obviously makes the message harder. The validity of the situation, a little more than a week into the war, has injected new uncertainty into GOP plans to tout their progress on the economy. One consultant for a Republican congressional candidate, who, like some others, spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe internal deliberations, recounted having to recently rewrite a fundraising pitch that touted gas prices from before the war broke out in late February. Democrats, meanwhile, were quick to blast Republicans over gas prices as part of a broader argument that Trump is distracted from economic issues at home. Some on the right have made similar criticisms of Trump in recent months, accusing him of entangling the United States in the kinds of costly foreign conflicts he once derided. The White House emphasized Monday that elevated prices would be temporary. President Trump has been clear that these are short-term disruptions and that Americans will see oil and gas prices drop rapidly once again Again, once the necessary objectives of Operation Epic Fury have been achieved and the regime's capabilities are neutralized, said White House spokeswoman Taylor Rogers, referring to the U.S. and Israeli military campaign in Iran. Trump has been dismissive of rising oil prices in recent days. Over the weekend, he wrote on social media that the higher oil costs were a small price to pay for safety, adding, "Only fools would think differently." He drew some unusual rebukes from the right last week as he said he was unconcerned about higher gas prices. "If they rise," he told Reuters, predicting a rapid drop when this is over. Matt Walsh, a conservative influencer, soon told his more than 4 million followers on X that they aren't helping anything, least of all our chances in the midterms, by pretending that this is good messaging. Many Republicans are eager for the war to end quickly, and Trump's latest comments boosted their hopes the gas price spike will be short-lived. As we saw the last 24 hours, it's a very volatile situation. This will start to calm down as this conflict is resolved, said Senator Steve Daines, Republican, Montana. "I'm confident it will be resolved." State Majority Leader John Thune, Republican, South Dakota, told reporters he is always concerned about the price of oil, the price of gasoline. "I hope that the operations there are successful and that once those objectives have been achieved, that things can resume some sense of normalcy in that region," Thune said. Trump campaigned on criticism of soaring inflation under President Joe Biden and promised to swiftly bring down prices. Now, some Republicans worry about falling into similar traps. Trump's approval ratings on the economy, a longtime political strength, have fallen since he took office. Neera Tanden, a senior White House official under Biden, who now leads the left-leaning Center for American Progress, said price jumps under Trump could be especially damaging because there's an easy story to tell about how Trump's policies caused them. "They only have one person to blame, and that is the President of the United States," she said. Republicans were mostly supportive of the U.S. strikes on Iran in a Washington Post poll conducted just after the military operation began. But independents opposed them by about 2-1, and the public overall is critical. 3/4 of Americans said they are concerned about the possibility of a full-scale war with Iran. How the war ultimately plays politically will depend on whether Trump can end it quickly, many in the GOP said, and how wide-reaching the repercussions are, including how long gas prices stay elevated. One GOP operative in a swing state, who spoke on the condition of anonymity to speak candidly, said that they worry price hikes will lead to a bloodbath for Republicans in the midterms. "If this goes on beyond, I'd say, 2 months, then people are going to be really concerned about it," said Martha Zoller, a conservative radio host in Georgia, where Republicans face some of their most competitive congressional races. She recently filled up her tank for $3.19 a gallon. 2 weeks earlier, she said, she paid $2.59. She added that every candidate she has interviewed said they're hearing from people the same thing. Yeah, nobody wants to pay more, but they understand this is a short-term thing. Administration officials are very sensitive to energy costs for consumers and have been discussing options to bring gas prices down, such as asking producers to drill more, lifting sanctions on Russia, and releasing oil from the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve, according to Dan Eberhart, a GOP donor and oil executive. The administration has eased some sanctions already. The administration is well aware of how important gasoline prices are and is focused on trying to find a quick solution, Eberhart said. Theodoric Meyer contributed to this report. And continuing from the headlines, Trump's wearing of baseball cap during dignified transfer draws criticism. President Trump faced continued blowback for wearing a USA emblazoned cap during a dignified transfer ceremony for soldiers killed in the war with Iran. By Michael Birnbaum and Kat Zakrzewski. Dover, Delaware. President Donald Trump donned a white USA baseball cap Saturday afternoon as he saluted a transfer case draped with the American flag when the remains of the first 6 service members killed in the war with Iran were carried off an Air Force transport plane. The sartorial choice set off a controversy that continued into Monday as critics, including some Republicans, derided his hat as disrespectful and also criticized Fox News for airing footage that inaccurately showed Trump hatless. Trump's cap, emblazoned with USA in gold letters, appeared to be a model that retails on the Trump Organization's online store for $55. This fool has absolutely no sense of dignity or appreciation for the moment, Michael Steele, Republican National Committee Chair from 2009 to 2011, and a critic of Trump, wrote on X. It's called the dignified transfer for a reason. Take off your damn hat. For years, presidents and vice presidents from both parties have been criticized for conduct and fashion choices viewed as disrespectful to the military or the office of the presidency. One of Trump's critics noted that Republicans would have rebuked a Democrat for making the same wardrobe decision as Trump. I know what Republicans would have said if Obama had done that. I would have written a statement, wrote Douglas Hay, a former communications director for the Republican National Committee. Shameful. The White House did not explain Trump's decision to wear the hat and dismissed the criticism. The president grieved with their incredible families, shared his love, and expressed the deep gratitude for our entire nation, White House Communications Director Stephen Chung said in a statement. It's unfortunate never-Trumpers are disgustingly playing partisan politics, and they need their heads checked. Trump and his allies have often attacked other leaders for fashion choices they viewed as disrespectful. During an explosive blow-up in the Oval Office with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky last year, Brian Glenn, a correspondent at Real America's Voice and the partner of former Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican Georgia, pressed Zelensky on his decision not to wear a suit to a meeting with Trump. The meeting ultimately resulted in Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance scolding the Ukrainian leader for not being grateful enough for U.S. support in the war. In 2021, conservatives widely criticized President Joe Biden for checking his watch during the dignified transfer of soldiers who died in Afghanistan. President Barack Obama faced blowback for asking Marines to hold umbrellas over him and Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan during a rainy news conference in the Rose Garden in 2013, and he was widely panned for wearing a tan suit to a news conference in 2014. Vice President Dick Cheney's decision to wear an olive parka and a ski cap to a solemn ceremony to mark the 60th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz in January 2005 was criticized as inappropriate, in contrast with the black overcoats other leaders wore. Fox News took a hit over the weekend when it aired footage multiple times of Trump on the Dover tarmac without a hat, using footage from another time he attended a dignified transfer at the same base. The network issued an on-air apology after critics on social media accused the network of covering up Trump's decision to wear a baseball hat. Fox's Griff Jenkins said on air later that day that the new network inadvertently aired footage from an older dignified transfer. Fox News Media said in a statement that the footage was mistakenly used during the video sourcing process. Joey Jones, host of The Big Weekend Show and a combat veteran, apologized to any service members upset by the video. Trump did not have his hat on during his entire stop in Delaware on Saturday. The president exited Air Force One at 1:22 p.m., walking hatless down the steps at Dover Air Force Base, where the temperature was in the mid-50s under overcast skies, at least 20 degrees colder than the Florida climate he had departed. The baseball cap, its back half folded into the front as though he did not intend to use it in that moment, was in his hand. As he entered his armored vehicle, he turned toward the press, mouthed the words, "Thank you," and held up his fist, as he often does. The president's motorcade then made a short trip across the tarmac to a building where the slain soldiers' families were waiting. He met with them privately for about an hour. After the meeting, the president's top aides and other dignitaries, governors, lawmakers, and senior military leaders walked to the area near the massive C-17 transport plane where they were to stand at attention across from the seated families as the remains of the soldiers were transferred to vans. Trump and Vance took separate motorcades across the tarmac, and once the families were in place along with the other dignitaries, the leaders and their wives emerged from their vehicles. Trump wasn't wearing a hat. He briefly disappeared from the sightline of cameras and journalists as he composed himself. When he reappeared, the white hat was on, USA in gold stitching across the front, the same or similar to the one he wore the previous weekend in the recorded video in which he announced to the American people the start of the attack on Iran. The hat features an American flag on the left temple, and on the right is emblazoned with a 45-47 logo, a reference to Trump's non-consecutive terms. Trump has faced criticism for wearing merchandise that his family business profits from while engaged in presidential duties. The Trump store website said the hat will take an additional 7 to 10 days to ship due to high demand. Later on the flight back to Miami, Trump came to the rear of Air Force One to speak to reporters. The hat was gone, and his hair was perfectly in place. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Washington Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the Politics section. In Trump's Washington, Congress has little power left. The president has started a war and levied sweeping tariffs, marking a major expansion of executive power at the expense of the legislative branch. By Liz Goodwin. Early in March, senators gathered to take a vote meant to remind President Donald Trump of Congress's power. Just a few days before, the president had launched a war against Iran without seeking legislative approval. 2 senators pushed forward a resolution that would have halted the fighting until Congress officially authorized military action, its prerogative under a 1973 law passed near the end of the Vietnam War. On his way into the Senate chambers, Senator Rand Paul, a Republican and libertarian from Kentucky, said founder James Madison once wrote that each branch of government's ambition would counteract that of the others. But I think Madison never imagined or envisioned a Congress with no ambition, Paul said. This is a Congress without ambition. This is a Congress without really a belief structure in defending legislative prerogative. They are just a rubber stamp for whatever a president tells them to do. Paul walked onto the Senate floor and cast the lone GOP vote for the measure, which failed. The vote was merely the latest capitulation of a GOP-controlled Congress that has subordinated itself to the executive branch headed by Trump. While lawmakers once jealously guarded their constitutionally endowed power over spending, trade, and war, regularly checking the executive, Republicans in the 119th Congress have cast themselves as helpmeets to the president instead. I have no intention of getting in the way of President Trump and his administration, House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican Louisiana, said in late January when asked about his procedural maneuvering to prevent members from voting against the president's tariffs. He has used the tariff power that he has very effectively. Weeks later, the Supreme Court disagreed, issuing an opinion that struck down most of Trump's sweeping tariffs as an infringement on Congress. Yes, legislating can be hard and take time, and yes, it can be tempting to bypass Congress when some pressing problem arises. But the deliberative nature of the legislative process was the whole point of its design, Supreme Court Justice Neil M. Gorsuch, a Trump appointee, reminded everyone in his opinion. Asked if he would work with Congress to enact new tariffs, Trump said, "I don't have to." He later imposed new tariffs using a different authority. Lawmakers of both parties have been ceding congressional power to the executive long before Trump was elected, especially on matters of war and trade. Congress has not officially declared war since World War II and has passed laws delegating its trade power to the president in some circumstances. A number of political factors, such as the growing role of big money donations, even in local races, the organizational power of party activists, and the excoriating exposures of social media, often discourage legislators from separating themselves from their parties. But Trump's second presidency has marked a major advance in the expansion of executive power at the expense of the legislative branch, an acceleration the president has not been shy about pursuing. That has raised concerns for some politicians, especially those who have left office, about maintaining the balance of powers seen as central to American democracy. I learned ninth grade civics. You've got three equal branches of government, said Fred Upton, the Republican from Michigan who chaired the House Energy Committee until 2017 and left Congress in 2023. But right now, the Congress is not one of them. It abdicated everything to the White House. Trump routinely dismisses the idea that Congress might exist as an obstacle to his will. When a reporter asked him last year how he planned to rename the Defense Department as the Department of War, given it takes an act of Congress to do so, the president brushed off the concern. "We're just going to do it. I'm sure Congress will go along," he said. A mountain of executive orders, a trickle of legislation. Over the past year, Congress has allowed the executive branch to refuse to spend or delay funds that legislators appropriated, overhaul agencies without consulting it, and issue executive orders on matters that previously would have been approached only via legislation. Scandal-tainted presidential nominees who might have failed to win approval in past administrations have largely muscled their way through tense confirmations, as Trump let Republicans know he would take any no votes as betrayals that could lead to primary challenges for rogue senators. No Congress has given up its power quite like this one, but its ability to do so stems from the behavior of past Congresses. Lawmakers began legislating away their tariff authority starting in the 1930s. They have frequently refused to hold votes authorizing wars in recent decades, including when the Obama administration asked them to authorize military action against the Islamic State. Vanishing bipartisanship also has made passing bills difficult, tempting members of Congress to lean on their presidents to accomplish their goals. Members of Congress in both parties have been willing to give up their institutional power to the executive branch because it is hard to legislate in Congress, said Molly Reynolds, the vice president and director of government studies at the center-left Brookings Institution. And the partisanship and polarization makes it hard for parties to get the things it wants to get done. This has created an opening for a president eager to expand his influence. Trump issued 225 executive orders during his first year back in office, several times more than the 55 he signed in the first year of his first term, and far above the 77 President Joe Biden signed in 2021. Some of Trump's first executive orders in his second term were directives to effectively eliminate federal agencies authorized by Congress. As Trump busied himself with enacting his agenda, Congress did little. The legislature passed and enacted just 68 public laws in 2025, many of them repeals of Biden-era policies. During the same time in Trump's first term, Congress passed and enacted 96 laws. Many Republicans have excused Trump's incursion into their territory, arguing Congress has become too dysfunctional to tackle GOP priorities such as lowering the ever-expanding national debt. The debt has continued to climb under Trump, reaching more than $38.8 trillion, according to the Treasury Department. They've defended giving the president wide latitude to set both his and their agendas. Johnson, who emerged as a weakened speaker in a closely held House after a bitter internal battle, said after Trump was sworn in that part of Congress's role was to look through Trump's executive orders and decide which ones should be passed into law. One of the first bills the House passed in 2026 did just that. It codified Trump's executive order allowing shower heads to have higher water flow rates. If you want a nozzle that drizzles on your head, then go get one of those, said its author, Representative Russell Fry, Republican, South Carolina. That should be your choice as a consumer. Another lawmaker, Representative Jeff Van Drew, Republican, New Jersey, a close ally of the president, boasted last year about his role in persuading Trump to sign not legislation, but an executive order pausing wind energy. We wrote that first part, he said of the order in an interview with conservative Newsmax Network, proud to be part of it. Even this Congress's signature achievement, the massive tax and immigration legislation called the One Big Beautiful Bill, which became law in July, involved an unusual level of involvement from the president, who served as something of an unofficial whip, pressing House members to support it. He handed out free merchandise to fence-sitting members, fielded their phone calls, and promised executive actions to get their votes. You know, it was supposed to be in 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 different bills, Trump said at the signing ceremony for the sweeping law in July. I said, let's do it in one big beautiful bill. And Congress did. A state of emergency. Constitutionally, there is a way a president can sidestep Congress and gain additional powers when there is a national emergency. The idea is that sometimes, such as in the case of a devastating attack or natural disaster, there is no time for deliberation, and the executive must act decisively on behalf of the American people. In 2001, George W. Bush declared a national emergency in the wake of the 9/11 attacks, and Jimmy Carter declared one in 1979 due to the Iranian hostage crisis, allowing him to freeze Iranian government assets held in the United States. Trump has made liberal use of his power to declare an emergency, declaring 11 overall, including emergencies around fentanyl, energy and trade deficits to reshape global trade policy and implement other policies. Barack Obama declared one national emergency in his first year of office for the swine flu, and Joe Biden declared 4. But Republicans, aware of Trump's unique political popularity with their party's base, despite his broad national unpopularity, have indulged him, even as he uses the power to levy tariffs many of them dislike. Paul, a fiscal hawk who rode into Congress on the Tea Party wave about 15 years ago, is a rare exception. He's given impassioned speeches against Trump's emergency declarations. He's worked with Democrats multiple times, once to try to cancel the fentanyl trafficking emergency Trump declared to impose tariffs against Canada, and again to try to terminate the trade deficit emergency Trump cited to levy global tariffs. Only a handful of Republicans have joined him in that effort, however, and Trump has blasted him on social media as a disloyal person with crazy ideas. I think this is too much power, Paul said of the emergency powers. He supports legislation to make presidential emergency declarations expire after 30 days if Congress doesn't affirmatively vote to extend them. The problem is, we probably had a dozen Republicans interested in the issue when there was a Democratic president, but now that there's a Republican president, they've sort of melted into the ether, Paul said in an interview late last year. I can't find them. Some signs of pushback. As Trump's poll numbers have slipped and Republicans now fear a potential drubbing of this year's midterm elections, the president has faced some new pushback from Capitol Hill. Republican lawmakers with oversight over spending were hesitant to speak out when the U.S. DOGE service, led by Elon Musk, aggressively advanced on their power of the purse last year, shuttering and reorganizing entire agencies without consulting the committees that oversee them. and ignoring numerous inquiries from lawmakers about where congressionally allocated funding was going. Now those same lawmakers have written some guardrails into the spending bills that recently became law, attempting to claw some power back from the administration to prevent it from dictating how money will be spent. In November, facing pressure from their base, House Republicans voted overwhelmingly to release government files concerning disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein, despite Trump's initially fierce resistance to that move. Republicans have also shown increased willingness to speak out when they are ignored by the Trump administration. I'm often struggling to get briefings, clear information, or meaningful cooperation from the administration or the State Department, said Senator John Curtis, Republican Utah, to Secretary of State Marco Rubio at a January Senate hearing he attended. The Secretary pledged to get the department to cooperate better with him in the future. And complaints from Republican senators helped to lead the ouster of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi L. Noem, who performed poorly under bipartisan scrutiny in congressional hearings this month. More pushback could arise in coming weeks. Johnson's maneuver to prevent Republicans in the House from bringing up resolutions to roll back Trump's tariffs expired at the end of January. Weeks later, the House held a vote on canceling the national emergency underpinning Trump's tariffs on Canada. 6 Republicans voted for the measure, which passed. And with Trump threatening more foreign intervention against Cuba and other countries, Congress could again confront the White House via the War Powers Act, which requires U.S. forces to withdraw within 60 days unless Congress authorizes military action. Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat, Virginia, who sponsored the War Powers Resolution and others on tariffs, said he believed some of his colleagues are beginning to want to do oversight again, however slowly. It's a muscle that is weakened through lack of use, and I think it is getting stronger, Kaine said. It remains to be seen how much that muscle will actually be used, however, and some lawmakers fear the chamber's norms could be permanently eroded. Right now you're seeing the Republican Congress be more deferential to our Republican president, said Senator Lisa Murkowski, Republican Alaska, an appropriator and a moderate, and we're forgetting that we have a role in this process. Clara Entz Morse and Theodoric Meyer contributed to this report. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Washington Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the early brief section, The Shutdown That Everyone Has Forgotten, analysis by Dan Merka and Matthew Choi. In today's edition, could the stock market change Trump's view on Iran? We ask for your views on flying in America, but first, the shutdown that everyone has forgotten. Remember the government shutdown? Few do, it seems, including those on Capitol Hill, tasked with keeping the government open. Typically, even partial government shutdowns cause panic that consumes Congress, overshadowing other issues. That just hasn't happened during this partial shutdown. The House of Representatives is out all week, with Republicans in Florida for their annual retreat. The Senate is in town working on a housing bill, among other issues. But the path forward to reopening the unfunded Department of Homeland Security, which has been shut down since February 14, is wildly unclear. The impasse is caused by a fundamental disagreement about the department's immigration activities in the wake of an immigration enforcement operation in Minneapolis that left 2 Americans dead. Democrats want tighter controls on immigration and customs enforcement, which falls under DHS, in exchange for their votes to reopen the department. They show no signs of breaking, with Democratic Senator Tim Kaine, Virginia, stating over the weekend that the party wants to fund every part of DHS except those that deal with immigration, reopening the Transportation Security Administration, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the Coast Guard, and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Thus far, Republicans have blocked those efforts, Kaine said on CBS's Face the Nation. We want to fund those agencies, and we have a funding agreement that's already been negotiated between both parties in both houses, so let's do that. Republicans have maintained that they want the department fully funded, not broken out into pieces. While DHS is shut down, its immigration enforcement arms actually have the money to continue functioning as normal. Those agencies received $170 billion for immigration enforcement under the GOP's One Big Beautiful Bill, a point Republicans have repeatedly made in calling for Democrats to make a deal. Democrats know ICE is already funded, but they are willing to force hardworking Americans to suffer just to push their radical agenda and cater to the far-left base, said Delaney Bomar, a spokesperson for the Republican National Committee. Negotiations appear to be stalled, and as our colleague Paul Kane noted near the outset of DHS's closure, government shutdowns usually need a pressure point to force compromise that brings them to their end. There's no sign of any such pressure point in the current shutdown. One such pressure point might be that the shutdown is starting to affect everyday Americans. Flyers in Houston and New Orleans have faced hours-long wait times at security checkpoints staffed by DHS employees who are going without pay and missed their first paycheck this month. Some Republicans believe that worsening airport delays will help soften Democratic resolve on the shutdown. Another pressure point on the horizon could be the Trump administration's effort to confirm Senator Markwayne Mullin, Republican, Oklahoma, as the next DHS head. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi L. Noem was reassigned last week after months of controversy. Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican, South Dakota, said in the wake of Noem's ouster that Mullin's accession and confirmation process could be a huge development in the debate over funding. But Democrats have largely shrugged off any suggestion that Mullin's nomination could represent a path to funding the agency he could soon lead. It's not like Kristi Noem was the one who was involved in negotiating anything. She was a corrupt lackey, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat, New York, said last week. So, we're dealing with the White House before, and we're going to continue to deal with the White House at this point. What we're watching. President Donald Trump is uniquely focused on the state of the stock market. He brags about it regularly. He has made it central to his argument that the economy is succeeding, and his top lieutenants have even used its relative strength to dismiss other controversies. The stock market, you can say what you want, but it's a hell of an indicator, Trump said in 2025. That's why it's worth watching how the market's recent slide, the Dow closed up 0.5% Monday after a day of losses, could affect the president's decision-making. The war in Iran, spurred by Trump, is the reason for the downturn. Stock markets worldwide are spooked by soaring gas prices, with some estimates projecting that the average cost of a gallon of gas could surpass $4 by the end of the week. Our colleagues Todd C. Frankel, Evan Halper, and Isaac Arnstoff have been tracking the jittery markets and noted this trend. Oil prices reached heights not seen since the aftermath of Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine on Monday, before falling back by the time markets closed, as the Trump administration sent mixed signals about its Iran plans. The price for a barrel of Brent crude, the global oil benchmark, had at one point spiked to nearly $120, a level that could translate into gas prices surpassing a national average of $4 per gallon. It would be shocking if Trump wasn't following the markets. He always does. And he took to Truth Social to argue that rising gas prices were a very small price to pay for the Iran conflict, which he wrote would result in safety and peace. It will be worth watching whether the presidential resolve holds. We saw Trump alter his tariff policy in the face of a market downturn, moves that led to the term taco, Trump always chickens out. Is an Iranian taco in the president's future? There are already some signs that Trump may move to wrap up the fighting soon. days after Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told CBS that this moment was just the beginning of the war, Trump told CBS on Monday in an interview that he believed the war is very complete, pretty much. They have no Navy, no communications, they've got no Air Force. From the opinion section by Jim Garrity. Turns out gloomy Americans were right about the economy. The pace of economic change has accelerated beyond citizens' ability to keep up. Maybe Americans' post-pandemic economic pessimism was more astute than the professional economists thought. During President Joe Biden's last 2 years in office, he and his most ardent supporters argued that the U.S. economy was a roaring success, and the country's widespread unhappiness with it and Biden's correspondingly low job approval were unwarranted. In his 2024 State of the Union address, Biden boasted, "Our economy is literally the envy of the world. The stock markets enjoyed 2 great years, the unemployment rate was low by historical standards, and GDP growth was solid. Inflation had been terrible in 2022, but was declining and below 4% by the summer of 2023. Yet Americans were unimpressed with both the aging Biden and the state of economy during his term. Then Donald Trump took the presidential oath of office for a second time and declared, "The golden age of America begins right now." Unsurprisingly, right after Trump's inauguration, Republicans started rating the state of the economy better, and Democrats started rating it worse. But the net effect was no change, and overall, in the Pew Research Center's latest survey, just 28% of U.S. adults rate economic conditions as excellent or good, while 72% say they are only fair or poor. Unless your name is Sam Darnold, this probably doesn't feel like a golden age to you. Continuing into the Trump era, economists scratched their heads and wondered why, if the data looked so good, the public felt so gloomy. Headlines asked, "The economy is doing okay, so why are Americans so pessimistic about their prospects?" and tried to analyze why so many Americans dislike this fast-growing economy. Economists started discussing the K-shaped economy, in which prospects were improving for the well-off and declining for the poor and less educated. That's a factor, no doubt, but economic prospects have always been better for the rich, in large part because they're, rich. It takes money to make money. And the S&P 493, an index that leaves out the 7 high-flying tech firms of Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, Nvidia, and Tesla, shows much more modest growth than the Magnificent Seven. So perhaps the economic data was offering a misleadingly cheery sense of how the country as a whole is doing. Friday's jobs numbers brought evidence suggesting that the gloomy types accurately saw weakness in the economy that the official numbers obscured. The latest release from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics showed a loss of 92,000 jobs in February, with downward revisions for the 2 months before that. Employers added just 181,000 jobs in 2025, around 70% fewer than BLS's initial estimate of 584,000. And the revised numbers are getting worse, not better, with the job site Indeed's economic research arm concluding the labor market has averaged essentially zero net job creation over the past 6 months. Keep in mind, in August, economists at the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis calculated that the U.S. economy needs to add between 32,000 and 82,000 jobs per month to keep the unemployment rate stable. BLS data indicates that the United States has 6.5 million unfilled jobs, which sounds like a lot, but in January 2023, that figure was above 10 million. The good news is that a lot of jobs got filled, but now there are significantly fewer job openings. Employees know they have leverage with employers if they're in demand, but it feels as if fewer and fewer companies are hiring. If companies are growing increasingly risk-averse in Trump's second term, part of the reason is a spectacularly erratic president who has become a one-man force for economic unpredictability and instability. Trump started his second term by launching a trade war against the whole world, subsequently lost a Supreme Court decision on tariffs, threw a public tantrum claiming the court had been swayed by foreign interests, and then turned around and imposed new tariffs to replace the old ones under a new justification. Trump loves intervening in markets as much as his new best buddy, New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani, at any given moment, and any company can find itself denounced on Truth Social as being run by left-wing nutjobs. One day, the artificial intelligence company Anthropic has a $200 million contract with the Pentagon. The next, Trump orders every federal agency in the United States government to immediately cease all use of Anthropic's technology. And all this is before the economic disruption caused by the U.S. going to war in Iran. Gas prices immediately jumped, and when gas becomes more expensive, everything that gets transported by gas gets more expensive too. The booming stock market is now freaking out with good reason. Why are Americans economically gloomy? Because it feels like the pace of change has accelerated well beyond our ability to keep up. We can live with a dynamic economy, but we also want some stability and predictability in our lives. A president and his administration can't control a lot of things about the economy, but they can usually control their own statements, decisions, and policy choices. This president, however, may not even be able to control himself. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Washington Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the Health section. I'm a computer scientist. Here's how we should help aging parents with technology. As the tech industry shifts toward artificial intelligent agents and generative user interfaces, helping loved ones use digital tools will become more difficult. Guest column by Debolina Chettopadhyay, The Conversation. This past Christmas, I helped my parents choose a water filter. The latest smart models all came with a smartphone app that promised to monitor filter life, track water quality, and automatically request service. Yet my father, age 75, and mother, 67, were quick to reject them in favor of a non-digital model. Every time it updates or I forget how to use it, we'll have to call you, my dad said. As an only child living 8,000 miles away, I didn't need convincing. My parents are aging in place and don't need traditional caregiving. They cook, drive, and manage their home just fine. Instead, I provide what I call technology caregiving, helping them with their digital activities of daily living, such as online banking or booking theater tickets. But as the tech industry shifts towards artificial intelligence agents and generative user interfaces, promising to make devices smarter than ever, I am bracing for this invisible workload to become heavier, not lighter. I know this is not just because I'm a caregiver for aging parents, but through my job as a computer scientist studying human-computer interaction. Technology caregiving. Technology caregiving is the act of helping someone use digital tools. While this isn't entirely new, people have long helped grandparents program VCRs and connect parents' desktop computers to the internet. The stakes have changed. Today, digitization is ubiquitous. Helping with these tools is no longer just occasional unpaid tech support. It is a form of continuous caregiving essential for maintaining independence. For example, even the simple act of clipping coupons has gone digital, marginalizing older adults who are unable to navigate store apps to access these discounts. People often view older adults as resistant to technology, but recent years, particularly since the COVID-19 pandemic, have shattered that myth. Many older adults are now online and willing to use these tools, but they require frequent help from family, friends, or communities. The innovation tax. The problem isn't just that devices and apps are getting complex, it's that they are constantly changing. Frequent software updates and shifting interfaces can be frustrating for all users, but they turn familiar tools into foreign concepts for older adults. This unpredictability is about to accelerate. Take generative user interfaces, which designers can use to dynamically generate an interface in minutes. Pair them with AI agents, and the system can assume the designer's role, taking independent actions based on how it perceives a user's intent or need. If the Pay Bill button is in a different place every third time you open a particular app because an AI decided to optimize the interface, you might feel perpetually incompetent if you can't quickly locate it. While the industry calls this personalization, for an older adult, it is a moving target. This relentless pace of change, even when intended to be helpful, is directly at odds with age-related cognitive changes. And this dynamic is continuing with the new generation of seniors. They may be more eager to adopt new tools than the last, but wanting to use technology is not the same as being able to use it when the rules are constantly changing. To navigate a brand new or shifting interface, your brain relies on fluid intelligence, the ability to reason, solve novel problems, and ignore distractions on the fly. Unlike the knowledge that people accumulate over time, fluid intelligence naturally declines with age. When an app updates or an AI optimizes a layout, it forces the user to discard their hard-won mental models and start over. For an older adult, this isn't just a minor inconvenience, it's a taxing job for their working memory. As an older adult participant in a study my colleagues and I conducted put it, I had a computer on my desk in 1980, okay, when nobody else did. So this is not a foreign language. But the changes that are made with little to no explanation, and then things that you knew how to do have either changed or disappeared completely, that is the stuff that absolutely drives me, and I will tell you, every other older adult in America, nuts. Help the helper. I believe that the way forward is to stop treating tech support as an afterthought and start designing for the technology caregiver. Digital literacy training for seniors and encouraging designing technologies for all users are important but not enough. It's important to build tools that share the burden. Two promising paths are emerging. First, cognitive accessibility features such as AI assistants that find buried buttons or provide real-time tech support can offload tasks from the caregiver. Second, tools for caregivers are beginning to move beyond simply controlling device feature access to capabilities such as allowing authorized access for banking as co-users or recording personalized instructions. These tools will also need to be tailored. Family caregivers need different tools than community helpers, such as libraries and senior centers. In the age of AI, innovation shouldn't be a tax on the aging brain. It should help bridge the digital divide. And finally, from the opinion section, don't trust this $4 solution for getting a prescription. Should AI prescribe your meds? The evidence is lacking. By Joseph Z. Sakran and Rahul Gorjavoli. Joseph V. Sakran is a trauma surgeon and executive vice chair of surgery at Johns Hopkins Hospital. Rahul Gorjavoli is a medical student and researcher at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine and MIT Critical Data. In Utah, an artificial intelligence platform called Doctronic is legally renewing prescription medications for patients without physician involvement. For a $4 fee, it conducts the intake, evaluates the patient, and sends the prescription to a pharmacy. Operating under a state regulatory exemption, this is a live commercial program handling real prescriptions for real patients with plans to expand to a dozen more states this year. Yet the entire scientific case for its safety rests on a single, unvalidated study. That study is a preprint posted to the online site MedRxiv in July. It has not been peer-reviewed. All 8 of its authors hold equity in Doctronic. The company's own internal committee conducted the ethics review. Colleagues requesting the underlying data were denied it. 8 months later, the study still hasn't been published in a peer-reviewed journal. That is evidentiary foundation for the first autonomous AI prescribing program in the United States, and it is cause for serious concern. We are now in a moment where AI development is outrunning the regulations designed to govern it, raising the risk to patients as a result. In healthcare, unchecked risks at scale is not a business disruption, it's a public health crisis. Doctronic's program operates under Utah's AI regulatory sandbox, a commendable and innovative but premature framework designed to let companies test innovations under reduced oversight. The company's cornerstone claim is that its AI matches human clinician treatment plans 99.2% of the time. State regulators have cited this figure. News outlets have repeated it. It has become the number that justifies the whole operation. But nearly every report missed one detail. That figure was derived from urgent care encounters, not from chronic medication renewals, which are the focus of the Utah pilot. There are different clinical tasks. These are different clinical tasks. And 99.2% accuracy applied at scale still means errors affecting thousands of patients. The question is, which patients? There is no way of knowing from an unreviewed company-authored preprint with unavailable underlying data whether those errors are randomly distributed or systematically concentrated among the elderly, the immunocompromised, patients with complex medical regimes, or patients whose conditions have quietly changed since their last doctor's visit. We understand the appeal of this approach. Medication renewals for stable chronic conditions are among the lowest risk prescribing tasks in medicine. Patients are already on medication, and the renewal process is often perfunctory. If AI can handle these routine tasks reliably, it could free up doctors for more complex care. But low risk is not no risk. Chronic conditions evolve silently. Blood pressure medications become insufficient as cardiovascular disease progresses. Diabetes medications require adjustment as kidney function declines. New medications introduce interaction risks. The routine nature of renewals makes clinical oversight easy to take for granted, but removing it entirely requires rigorous evidence showing that the AI can detect and act appropriately upon these silent changes. Furthermore, research shows that AI systems perform differently across patient population, and prescription tools are no exception. A mammography AI approved by the Food and Drug Administration was nearly 50% more likely to incorrectly flag normal results in Black women versus white women. We don't know whether Doctronic has similar blind spots because the data has not been shared. Yet even a digital thermometer requires validation data provided to the FDA, demonstrating safety and efficacy through transparent evidence and surviving regulatory scrutiny before ever reaching patients. This is not a regulatory gap. It's a regulatory void that allows room for harm in the name of innovation. Safety concerns have been broadly expressed. The American College of Physicians wrote that prescription drugs should not be prescribed without physician involvement. The American Medical Association warned that accuracy claims don't replace clinical judgment. A Nature commentary warned of a public health catastrophe. The FDA, meanwhile, says the program falls outside its regulatory purview. On the day the program was publicly announced, the agency published guidance reducing its oversight of AI-enabled health software. AI is bound to transform medicine, but the evidence bar matters as the foundation that makes innovations trustworthy. We have been here before. IBM Watson recommended unsafe cancer treatments before data review. What should responsible AI governments look like? The FDA should expand its regulatory purview to treat autonomous prescribing systems as the medical devices they functionally are. $4 to get a prescription is not a cheap price, but cutting corners on evidence for AI prescribing is bound to exact a far heavier cost. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the March 10th issue of the Washington Post. Your reader has been Cheryl. Thank you for listening.